First, now that mic is dead. This audio is dead. Now I can invite in Dylan. All right, seminar. Any seminar doesn't matter. Landscaping. All right. Good morning. Good morning. I hope you can hear me clearly. Today is, of course, Sunday, December the 5th. Thank you for joining me this morning. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. I hear the weather's supposed to get up to like 10 degrees tomorrow, so I'm assuming it'll be quite warm today. This morning I've been looking at some real estate, just looking at some properties. I'm going to share some of them with you this morning. And just to share my own thoughts on what I'm seeing in the market. I'm noticing a lot of listings, in particular, in this case, I'm looking in Sudbury. Where is my, hold on one second, because right now you're just looking at the title card, aren't you? There we go. I've been looking at a lot of properties in Sudbury lately. And what I've been noticing on the listings is I'm seeing a lot of listings that don't have any pictures. Now, I should be more clear because actually they do have pictures, but they don't have pictures of the interior of the house. So I'll show you right now. Put my screen up. I've got a listing here, and if you just look at it real quick, like this is whatever seven. Oh, this is not a good listing. I think that one does have interior. Here's 399 Montague, a property I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. And if you just look here at just the pictures that are included with the listing, you will notice that we can see the outside of the building very clearly, but we do not see inside of any units. I noticed this on quite a few listings, just as I was looking on there. I noticed this on quite a few listings, and I'm not speaking from a place of knowledge. That is, I can't say concretely that I know this to be the case, but you know, obviously I'm aware of the kind of the market cycle or the investing cycle for real estate, right? You kind of have you start out, rents are high and property values are low. High rents drive property values up. High property values drive rents down. Low rents drive property values down, and then rents increase and the cycle repeats, right? It's all playing off of supply and demand. And it's usually a cycle that plays out, the real estate business cycle, 10 to 20 year kind of a thing, depending where you are, how much the government distorts the market. There's a variety of factors, right? Now, it goes without saying the market is very distorted in Southern Ontario. Um, so the cycle might play out slightly longer, or it may have a much longer upswing and a much shorter um, decline period. Right. So, I think you see that in the GTA for sure, where the prices seem to go up and up and up. And we do have periodic spikes where it either drops a little bit or it kind of levels out for a short period before it continues climbing. A lot of that might be related to inflation or some other factors that aren't intrinsic to the real estate itself, but just to sort of market conditions outside of the real estate. Forehead looks shiny today. Um, so that's something to consider, right? This market cycle is something that every investor should always be thinking about. I would argue it's not something that is super important. I wouldn't spend too much time or energy on it, right? Because it's like the business cycle in stocks or in the general economy, right? Like, I don't think you uh, are, for example, I don't think you're making your Christmas shopping or holiday shopping if decisions, right, this year based on the fact that there might be a recession next year, right? Because I mean that's true every year, and yet we all still go out and spend money, right? And we make purchases, some of them major, some of them minor, whatever, because you can't predict, when the economy is going to crash. Um, Obviously there was a big dramatic crash of 2007, 2008. We know the business cycle is approximately 10 years. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 12, but somewhere in there, which means we're kind of overdue for that next large crash. And you could easily argue, well, Aaron, we went through that crash. It was called 2020, 2021. It's been this whole COVID pandemic thing, and the economics is just being kind of hidden, and totally fair, right? Like, okay. But I'm just saying, right? Like, you would think there'd be another crash coming in theory. And I don't think any of us are making our financial decisions based around that idea. So, in the same way, the business cycle as it relates to real estate, I don't think it's something that you should stress about too much, but you should be aware of it, right? When you're in that period, there are really two periods in the cycle where being an investor requires you to be very smart at that point in time, right? And that is when prices are high and rents are low, which is kind of the peak of the market. And it's not to say that you can't buy and make money at that point. It's just you have to be careful because prices are high and rents are low. And when prices are falling and rents are falling, because at that point, you are less likely to get burned at the top. You're not at the bottom of the market, but you may have to hold on to something that doesn't make money for a while, right? And so it's actually a very good time to buy then at the bottom of the market, as long as you buy right. And it can be a very good time to buy at the top of the market too, as long as you buy right. Right. So you have to be extra careful. Why am I saying all of this? Well, to go back to the listings here that got me started on the topic, I'm seeing a lot of listings like this one where there are essentially no photos of what you're buying. Right? Like, these photos are not super duper useful. Here's the outside of the building. I can see there's a dumpster here, which would imply that there's some kind of construction going on inside of this property, since I don't see, we have an aerial shot, a drone shot, whatever, and I don't see construction on the property. Also, notice our drone shot does not show that dumpster, so it was taken at a different point in time. But all the same, right? We're not seeing the interior of this unit. Now, I could go show you some other listings, and maybe we will as our hour progresses, that also don't have any photos. Now, if you look at the price of this property, it's listed for 649.9. It's 399 Montague Avenue. For those of you who don't remember, I have a property on Montague Avenue that actually is not that far away because it's 491 Montague Avenue. So this is about 100 addresses away from my house there, right? And wait, 491, 391. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm really close to this property. Is the deal. My property is not worth $650,000. It is not quite worth $500,000, and we just did a refinance on it. So like we know approximately what the value is. Now, this is a better house than what I own. That much is true. Oh, here, actually, here's the map. Can I zoom in on? That's not the kind of zoom I want. No, I can't. Looks like I can't zoom in on their map. But if this is where the property is located, I think I'm like here, a little bit north of the arrow. So I mean, we know the area pretty well. I don't believe that this property is worth $650,000, although there are a couple details I'm going to talk about in a second that might actually bump the value up to there. So it might not be a crazy price. But my point is that when I'm seeing a lot of properties where the price seems a little bit out of whack and they're not showing any pictures of the interior, that makes me question who they're marketing this property to, right? Now, obviously, uh, I sit down with you every single week and show you properties that are available for sale. Okay, maybe not every week do we talk about properties. Occasionally we don't. But for the most part, every week I show you properties that are for sale, largely in Sudbury, but around Ontario. And we look every week at the details, right? What does the property cost? What can we rent it for? What are the expenses? What are they selling it for? What's it going to cost us to finance it, right? All the factors that are going to go into whether or not this property produces income. And of course, one of the details in the analysis, and I'm actually going to pull up the analysis sheet right here and put it on the screen, right? One of the details that goes into my analysis every single time, where are you? Right here, is after rental value, renovation costs. Do you need to fix the place up? What's it going to take? Getting an inspection. I've got inspection here as well, right? All of these factors that go into um, making sure that this property is marketable, is tenantable, is going to bring in income. I actually have an issue right now. One of the units in one of our buildings, I don't know, there's something wrong with the heating. So that unit is quite cold and it's vacant at the moment, right? We're trying to get a tenant for it and it's quite cold. So we're having trouble getting people who want to stay in the unit because, of course, it's cold. And especially in Sudbury, where, it's like it's already blizzard conditions up there. People don't want to live in a unit like that, right? So now we've got to go, whatever. We'll probably put in some like electric baseboard heat for $1,000 and fix the problem and get it tenanted, right? But it's important that your units are marketable, right? If you buy a property that makes money on paper and then you have a unit that you cannot rent for X and Y reason, then it doesn't actually make the money that you calculated on paper, right? That much is pretty straightforward. So it's important that you buy a property that doesn't just work on paper, but actually is marketable, that people will actually pay what you put down on paper, right? And usually you can tell, sometimes you can't. But obviously, renovation and renovation expense goes into that, right? Now, if I'm looking at this listing, right, I've got this listing on my screen here and I'm looking at it and I don't have any pictures, right, of anything of consequence, then I have no idea how much money I might end up spending on a renovation, right? If I read their blurb, I'm told that things were redone in 2015 and everything should be in good condition, but obviously I can't just take the guy's word for it. So who again is this listing targeting? Eyes, this listing is targeting someone who is not a real estate investor. Maybe they fancy themselves as one, right? Right? Like maybe they would like to become one. Um, but if that is the case, there's someone who has heard about real estate investing, maybe from friends or on TV or wherever or on the internet, but has done no learning whatsoever and has just said, I'm going to jump in and buy something, right? Not the worst strategy. Hey, you learn by taking action. So it's definitely not the worst strategy as long as you have the money saved up because you might lose. You might lose a bit of money that first time you do it, right? That's what it seems like to me. Even if we go to, a heuristic, right? A little rule of thumb, I like to go by cost per unit. It's a great way to analyze things. It's a great way to understand things. It's not accurate, of course, especially because the cost per unit varies across the city, right? If I say the average cost per unit is $125,000 in Sudbury, that may be true until I get to the upscale area where it's $200,000 per unit, right? And it might be true until I get to like the hood where it's actually only 75,000 per unit. But on average, it works out, right? So I know that on average, properties are being valued around $125,000 per unit in Sudbury. And I know because I own a property in this area that my property was valued at around $133,000 per unit. Right. So I had a triplex, they valued around $400,000 kind of thing. That means that this property, I'm just going to pull out my trusty calculator here. This property at $125,000 per unit, right, is worth $500,000. At $133,000 per unit, it's worth $530,000. If I'm generous and I say $150,000 per unit, this property is then worth $600,000. What is it listed at? $650,000. So just be wary because I'm seeing a lot of these types of listings, and I think they're kind of aiming for to try and catch people who haven't necessarily done the numbers. Um, but to be fair to this listing, let me actually show you how it breaks down because it what am I doing here? It has some interesting upside, some interesting potential to it, and I'll show you why here in just a second. Um, the property itself is not a standard. If for those of you who can see the pictures, you can already tell this is not like a standard residential house. It's a very purpose built looking building. It kind of looks like it was originally intended to be like a small office building or something, but in any case, it is residential and nice rectangular apartment. Personally, this is the kind of property I would love to own. If the price was cheaper or if I could negotiate the price down, I would absolutely consider buying this. Like there's a part of me that wants to make an offer on it, but it's already oh no, this isn't the one with the conditional. Oh, maybe I could make an offer on it. Where was I? Here's my analysis, right? So this property, I don't have a good picture here. Let me show you the aerial view. This property is a little bit unique compared to many of the properties we look at, um, just because of the way the lot is situated. You can see here from the aerial shot. I guess that's pardon me, the best picture of it that I have. This property is on a large oversized lot, right? And so when you again look at the aerial picture, you'll notice that the property is not, this lot extends down a little bit that you can't quite see. The property doesn't occupy 50% of the land area. It's got quite a bit of parking space. In theory, the listing mentions potential development. You might be able to squeeze another building on. I'm not really seeing it from this photo, but I don't have great detailed information on exactly what the property boundaries are, as to how much of this you could build on. Because in theory, if you could squeeze in a duplex or a triplex onto this lot somewhere, you can imagine, right? That's a lot of extra money at 150,000 per unit. If you built a triplex, that would be 350. What would that? Sorry, $450,000, right? And assuming you already own land, you probably build a triplex for like 75 to $100,000 per unit. So you'd make a tidy little profit there, 150,000 to $200,000 in profit on that development deal if you could do that. So that's one thing that does get mentioned in the listing that you would have to consider. I've never done a development deal, so I can't bring my own personal experience to the table. I know, obviously, with a development deal, you're building, which means you're going to need some construction management skills and those sorts of things. Can be very lucrative. I know there are some investors. I've certainly read about some investors who they're able to use development deals to double or triple the value of a deal. Obviously, you can imagine if you bought this property $650,000, you built a triplex $450,000. You sell the triplex, you keep you keep the fourplex, then you're theoretically into a fourplex for like $200, 50K per unit, kind of a thing. And the ROI on that would be like in 5 years you've paid off the building, kind of a thing, something like that, right? So you're looking at infinite returns after 5 years on a property that you only paid $200,000 for with a value of approaching six, you're doing really, really well, right? So development deals are the kinds of thing that you really how do I oops, wrong mouse. They're the kind of thing you really want to explore if you can do them, but you have to understand they require a lot of specialized knowledge. Yes, Dylan.
If you were to do that, wouldn't you have to divide the land? Then you have to go like introduce the city into it. If you were to build it, then sell it, you have to split the land. Then you would have to sell the land on top with the triplex on top of that.
Yes, so you would have to get what's called a severance from the city that would split your lot into the two pieces that you wanted. It doesn't have to be an equal severance or anything, but you have to sever it, and then you'd be able to sell that lot individually, separate from your property. Although development deals are really interesting because you don't have to do it that way. You could also do like a long-term lease. I don't. They're not super common, but Almondo brought a property to me a couple of months ago. He was looking at a property in London there, and what they had done was they had granted a. I can't remember Almondo if it was a 10 or a 20-year lease, but it was a long-term lease to a property manager who was going to operate the building as like a home for the mentally unwell kind of a thing. And so they had a lease for like 20 years. It was going to be theirs. So the property owner hadn't sold the property. Instead, they just tied it up with a lease that was going to pay an expected return. And then now that they place with this guaranteed income, then they packaged that together and they were selling that as the end investment. So they were essentially saying to someone like, here's an investment that is worth $950,000 over 20 years. Pay us $850,000 for it, kind of a thing, and it's yours. So it's like a guaranteed income paying investment, which is a very, very attractive it's a very attractive product to people who are retirement aged, right? Because they want guaranteed returns because they're hoping to draw on that income every year, right? And so the banks sell people like that what are called pardon me, GICs, if you're familiar with the term, guaranteed income. What's the last letter? C. Shoot, I can't remember. But basically, it's a security that just pays you. No, it's probably not a security because that's a legal term, and it's probably not considered a security. It's more of an investment. But regardless, a GIC is just it's an account with the bank that pays you a defined benefit on a regular interval, right? And usually the rates are incredibly low, right? Like you're getting 1% or maybe some of the really good ones will pay you 2%. And you just make your interest that way, right? A lot of people will in part finance their retirement that way because financial advisors recommend those types of investments because they feel that they're very stable. But savvier investors, people who maybe have the help of financial advisors with an O, people who have the help of actual financial professionals and not just the clown at the bank, they may be advised to go buy this real estate. Because even if you take my example of the $850,000 investment over 20 years and they, sorry, 950 and they pay 850 for it, like you can calculate that return is $5,000 a year. It's a terrible return. Uh, it's not the kind of investment that you would, but it required no work on their part. It's guaranteed income. They don't have to worry about losing their investment, right? Those are the things that the people are looking for. And this is one of the things that's very important to understand just about investing in general. And like you probably all do, but I'll just remind you anyways, is investing like any kind of economic activity is not about what you value, right? It's about what other people will value in exchange for what you have, right? So even though this property maybe to you is not worth paying $850,000 for to only see a $5,000 per year return, right? That's there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Your time value of money is much, much, much higher than someone who's older, right? And your risk. Sorry, give me a second. I've got this dog here freaking out. Ah, you go, leave me alone. Your appetite for risk, right, as a relatively young person is going to be much, much higher than that of somebody who's older, right? So these two things, right, you having a longer time preference, right, you being willing to wait for your return because you're younger, and you being willing to take more risk because you're younger, means that you're going to look for more aggressive investments where maybe you have to invest some of your time or your money to really get the maximum return, versus somebody who's maybe older. They're not looking for that anymore. Maybe they've already made their money and now they just want to live off. Like, you can imagine yourself in 30 years. Let's say you have $10 million, right? You're good, you're comfortable now. You just want to live your life, and you know it's going to cost you, I don't know, $200,000 a year to maintain your lifestyle. And you don't care if you invest your $10 million efficiently or not, as long as you have your $200,000, right? And in fact, yeah, you could invest, I don't know, let's say 10 million at 10% per year, and you could live off $1 million a year, but there's that 5% chance you're gonna lose your money, right? Whereas you could instead invest your $10 million at 2% per year, right? And only get your 200,000, but no risk at all of you losing your money, right? You can see how that's appealing to some people who are in that position, right? Obviously, a lot of people are not in that position, but for the people who are, that might be who you could market a development property to, right? And certainly when Armando and I looked at that building, um, that was what stood out to us, was like, this is not the kind of investment we're interested in. It's not, it doesn't have enough upside for us, right? That's not to say there isn't somebody who will like that kind of investment. And also keep in mind one other thing about like time horizons and the different preferences that we all have for time. I expect to still be alive in 20 years, right? So I would not want to buy a house that's had 20 years of crazy people running through it, because I know that they destroy properties. But if let's say 75, so 20 years into the future would put me at 95. I'm not expecting to live to be 95 years old. It'd be nice, but I'd be real surprised if someone as big as I am lives that long. So chances are I'll be dead by 95. So in that case, do I care if the contract is with the loony bin management company? Not really, because it won't be my problem. It maybe at worst it'll be my kid's problem. And if I've got money in the bank and they're gonna have to take some of the money I'm giving them when I'm dead to take care of the problem, that sounds like a pretty fair trade to me, right? So that's how I think a lot of people look at these types of things, and that's something you have to remember when you see deals like that. Sometimes a deal does not make any sense, but only because it doesn't make sense for you, because it doesn't fit what you're looking for. Great thing about real estate is we can all kind of find what we're looking for in real estate, and there's so many different ways to approach the underlying asset and then determine what you want to do with it. And that applies, of course, not only to thinking about the real estate when you're looking to buy it, as we're doing right now, but also thinking about it when you're looking to exit, right? You got to keep in mind you're not always trying to sell it to somebody who has the same interest as you do, right? You might buy a property. Let's use a sixplex, for example, because I bought a sixplex, and the sixplex was a piece of crap, and it was a piece of crap, and we had to fix it up, and it required work and money, and it's still requiring work and money, and it's a bit of a pain in the butt, right? Eventually, one day, I might sell that property. And if I do, I might sell it to someone who does not want to deal with any of those problems. They'll want it to be turnkey, and they won't want to have to worry about it for, 5, 10, 20 years, right? Because everybody is coming with different expectations. And certainly, now that I've bought that house, with lots and lots of problems and deficiencies, and fixed it up, and we've made lots of money, I'd probably be willing to do it again, maybe even 2 or 3 more times. But I can tell you for sure that 10, 20 years from now, I do not want to be dealing with properties like that, right? 10, 20 years from now, my preference and what kind of property I will be willing to pay for will have changed, right? And really, I'm only a couple of years away from my preference changing already, right? Because the more you transition from, I need the return from this property for my immediate usage, to, I just need a return on this property, the less important to you the size of the return becomes, and the more important to you the effort of the return becomes, right? So obviously, when I'm starting out my first property, I've been working for the last, I don't know, 3, 4 years to save up my first 50, $80,000, whatever it is, down payment. I'm hoping to turn that $50,000 or $80,000 down payment into, I don't know, $160,000 or $200,000. I'm hoping to really do well, right, and make that money because I don't have that much money. And then when I've got my 200, I'm hoping I can maybe turn that into 4 or 8, right? And but when I've got $2 million, I might be cool with getting 10% on my 2 mil, right? 10% of $2 million is $200,000, right? My lifestyle does not cost me $200,000. That is, I don't spend $200,000 per year on myself, right? So if you told me I could earn $200,000 a year with an investment, I'd probably take it because that would mean I could quit my job, I could retire if I wanted to, and I would still be making a surplus, which means I could continue to save. And so I'd be accomplishing a goal, right, in the retiring thing, right? And so I wouldn't need to get that crazy 100% return that I aimed for with my first property deal, right? That's, I think, pretty obvious, but it's just something to keep in mind, right? Everybody, what am I trying to say here? I was listening to somebody the other day on YouTube, and it was a stupid thing. I shouldn't have done it, but I was on YouTube and I was listening to this person, and they were, I don't know what they were. They believed in like socialism or something. They wanted to distribute the wealth and equalize everybody and whatever. And so it's a they're stupid, but I understand where they're coming from. When I was a younger person, it made sense to me too. It doesn't work, but I get where they got confused. But I was kind of listening to them, and the thing that rang out to me when listening to them was their perspective assumed that the world does not change, that things are static, that they're fixed, that they're not dynamic, right? That Aaron today is in the same financial position as Aaron 2 years ago, who's in the same financial position as Aaron 5 years ago, who's in the same financial position as Aaron 15 years ago, right? And it's like, well, 15 years ago, Aaron didn't have any income because he was a 15-year-old kid, right? Aaron today has income, a lot of income, especially compared to the 15-year-old kid, right? I'm not in the same position. And the idea that the socialist had to step into my life and give me stuff when I was 20 because I didn't have as much as the 30-year-old. Well, no, of course I didn't. I was 20. I wasn't 30. I am now 30 and I probably have as much as or more than many 30-year-olds, right? So it's not appropriate to look at me at one point in my life and then compare it to someone in a different point of their life and say, well, there's obvious inequality there because I don't know where I'm going to end up in the future, right? And one of the things that I've come to realize just investing and really and having the mindset shift, and then I can listen to some of these people and their thing, it's like they think that the world is fixed. And it's very important that you be aware as an investor and as a person operating in the marketplace, in any marketplace, right? The world is dynamic. It is always changing. It's always in flux, and everybody is in a different point in their life with different needs and different requirements. You know, I'm gonna take the humble minivan. Like a Chrysler. I don't even know, a Windstar. Is that what they call them? Whatever. A minivan. Um, a minivan is not a vehicle that any 16-year-old boy dreams of. A minivan is not a vehicle that gets any 18-year-old woman excited, right? Minivan is not a vehicle that appeals to a young person. And yet minivans sell by the millions, right? Because obviously a minivan appeals to people with a family, people who have things to move, maybe people who have businesses and they've got lots of stuff to carry from place to place. Doesn't appeal to a 16-year-old kid who's trying to get laid. Doesn't appeal to an 18-year-old girl who's trying to meet the coolest guy at the club, whatever, right? So this is life, right? The thing that appeals to us is going to change, it's going to shift. And you need to understand that if you own a minivan, don't try to sell it to a 16-year-old. Go find a 34-year-old with a family who's going to be interested in your minivan, right? And it's the same thing with your real estate. There's a very important thing to think about with your exit strategy is just because you like minivans doesn't mean everybody does, right? So if you've got a property and your property is, let's just say it's a minivan, right? Then you're going to want to look for the people who are trying to buy minivans, and you want to understand what it is that minivan owners look for in their minivan when they are buying a minivan. And so in the same way, come back to my development deal now, I want to understand what is the highest and best use. Development is tricky in the sense that when you have a piece of land, you're always trying to use it at its highest and best use. That's the literal legal term that they'll teach you if you try to become a real estate agent, right? What's the highest and best use of this land? That is, given all of the many options for how we could use this land, what is the one that basically pays the most, right? Is it best used as apartments? Is it best used as a factory? Is it best used as a tourist trap? What is the best function for this piece of land, right? When in half, and now we're going to develop on the one side of it, right? Well, what would be the best type of property to put there? First of all, we have to consider what does zoning allow us to do, right? We don't have unlimited freedom because of zoning. We might be stuck doing a residential, and then the question becomes, well, is a single family more valuable than a multifamily in this neighborhood? Would a single family sell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Those are the things you need to think about. And then once you've decided, okay, this is the correct highest best use, then you obviously need to implement. I already talked about how construction and development can be a little tricky. You've got to manage. It takes a lot of work and budgeting and capital. But if you do all of that stuff, you can take a deal, which again, $650,000, I think is probably overpriced for this property. Uh, but you can make it a home run, right? By making a property that maybe now your net cost is only $200,000 or $300,000 on, because you were willing to do all the extra work of that development deal, and obviously you had to wait, and there was financing involved. But you're going to hold on to this property for maybe a year or two before you develop, and et cetera, et cetera. But you can set your eyes on the prize, and you can really do something like that. The one thing you really need to understand if you were going to try and undertake a development deal of any kind is development is capital intensive, which means either you need to have money or you need to have somebody who has money, right? If you don't have those things, don't even worry about doing a development deal. Uh, okay, well, I should say you can also get a bank, like development financed by the bank. Banks will finance development. I don't know exactly how hard it is to get the loans. Like I said, I've never done it. My guess would be the loan is easy to get, assuming the underlying asset has equity in it. So if you buy this property and you're at max mortgage 80/20 kind of thing, it might be kind of difficult for you to get a mortgage for development deal. But if you could buy this with like a vendor take back or something, so you had some equity in it, you'd probably have very little trouble getting a development mortgage so you could go and build on this property. But that is something that's very important to keep in mind, right? You're gonna have to figure out either financing or borrowing money from someone you know so you can do the development portion of the deal. Anyways, let's go look at the analysis for this property, right? So this is a fourplex, okay, and there's pardon me, there's not enough detail on the rental, so I've made some assumptions. Okay, in this area of Sudbury, you can rent a two-bedroom unit for between 12 and 1400. We see a lot of like that 1300, 1200 range, 1250. So I put in 1250. Okay, there's four two-bedroom units in this property, so 1250 times four is $5,000 a month in income. Okay, this property also has some parking spots that are rented by the locals. Uh, it does not say how much they're rented for. So I put in $150 on the assumption maybe they rent like three spots at $50 a month each. Could be more, could be less. There is also, I believe there's also coin operated laundry, but maybe I didn't put that in here. But that's fine. So those are the assumptions that I've made, just so that they're very clear. And you can see, obviously, that's 5150 per month in income. We go through on expenses. These are mostly pro forma numbers, so they were in the listing, which means pro forma is Latin for lie, so they could be wrong. My mortgage payment, so that's obviously not pro forma. So we know at this price, you're going to pay about $2,000 a month for the mortgage. The taxes, they said they're $5,600 a year in taxes. That sounds right. That sounds right compared to the property we have. So those are probably accurate too. That's almost $500 a month in taxes. You have insurance. I put $2,500. Could be a little higher. Could be a little lower. It's going to depend what's in that building. Assuming everything is like modern, they do say that they rebuilt the units, not renovated, rebuilt, which would imply that they tore stuff out of the wall and everything is up to code. If they did that, insurance will be lower than this. It'll probably be in like $1,800 range. But I don't know. I don't even have pictures of the inside of these units to say that it looks like that might be something that happened. So I'm going to assume that the insurance is still going to be kind of high. Electricity. So the units are separately metered except for one. One unit, the electricity is included. So it's $400 a year for electricity for that unit. Okay. They've got water. So they say their water expense per year is $2,300. So that's it. I don't know. And gas, they say their gas expense per year is $2,560, $2,500. Gas bill seems really low to me, but they are supposed to have some like high efficiency boilers, and boilers certainly are the most efficient. So they they may actually pay that low of a number. And the building is nicely built; it's kind of symmetrical. So assuming that their radiator runs are located in the right position, there's a lot of efficiency, right? Because they're heating the internal walls and they're kind of not wasting a lot of heat. Um, I don't know. Again, pro forma, the numbers could be complete BS. Property management, we know property manager we work with charges 8%. There are property managers, of course, that charge 9%, 10%, 11%, or some that charge 8%, but with fees and da da da. So there are a variety of ways for property managers to bill you. It is important that you understand how your property manager is going to operate. But in general, 8 to 10%, even as high as 12. I've also seen as low as 5, although not in Sudbury. That's in a different municipality. So just know your market, know who you're working with. Usually, once you've established a relationship with the property manager, you'll keep working with them, so you'll know their rate. Uh, Unfortunately, sometimes they're gonna fall short of your expectations, and you might make a switch. So this number obviously could change. Landscaping. This property has no grass. So the only thing that it requires is snow removal. It's also very flat and paved. So it should be very easy to get snow removal. I estimate that's going to cost less to do the snow removal here, but my estimate might be too low. I don't know because I really went kind of low. I said $500 for the year, and that's probably not realistic. Snow removal is probably still going to be like $800. But we can see here when we tally up all of our expenses, we've got $3,500 a month in expenses off our 5,150 in income. So it's not looking great so far. There's only $1,500 left for withholdings, right? We've got vacancy 2%, so $100. We've got repairs and maintenance. I said 5%. 5% is because they say that they redid everything in 2015. If you inspected the property and found that that wasn't true, you might want to go with 7.5 or even 10% for repairs and maintenance, which would obviously make that more expensive. Tenant consideration, I do that. You don't have to, but there's 4 units, so $20 each per month. And the listing says that you own the on-demand hot water boilers. That is not clear to me whether they mean hot water boilers for the boiler system or whether they mean the hot water tank for water consumption. So I assume they meant the hot water tank system because that's what it seems like they're talking about in the listing. But there's a chance you'd have to rent that. That'd be about $50 to $75 per month. And that's about it. Now you're going to see here, our withholding is only about $430 a month, which means this property cash flows $1,253 per month. Pretty good. Pretty good, right? Actually, that's really good, right? If we go down here, we will see that's about $15,000 a year in cash flow. I'd buy that, right? And hold on, how much are we in this for? Because we're down. You need $145,000 to close. So $15,000 on 145, you're already at a 10-11% return. We haven't considered principal recapture. We haven't considered passive appreciation. So it's pretty good. Cash flow is looking pretty good. Now, again, this is based on some pro forma numbers, which means they could be complete BS. I certainly would want to double check those electricity numbers. I'd certainly want to double check that gas number because it just seems really low to me. On the other hand, I did estimate insurance might be a little bit high. Also, my landscaping is low, almost for sure. It should probably be about $100 a month, which would cut that cash flow down a little bit. But in general, this is a property that looks like it should make money. Right now, in that area, I have a property that we bought. I keep mentioning it. That property cash flows something on the order of I want to say it's about $15,000 per year, somewhere in there. So the idea that this makes $15,000 to me is not that shocking. Now, at this price, I'm surprised to see that cash flow number. I personally think this price is a little bit high. Um, Again, if you just say to me, Aaron, completely blind, are you going to pay $650,000 for a fourplex on Montague Road in Sudbury? I would probably say to you no. But again, when you look at the property and you look at the potential, this is the kind of thing where I would definitely investigate a little closer. Give the realtor a call and see what is going on with this property, because it has potential for sure. The fact that it's separately metered and fully tenanted currently is pretty awesome, because separately metered is huge. There is another thing I really like about this property. It's just my own personal quirk. You can see it has a beautiful flat roof. I love that. Flat roofs mean it's easy to put solar panels on them. And I love the idea of solar panels. I'm not saying they're a good investment. Actually, the math on them is pretty crap a lot of the times. But the idea that you put something on your roof and it harvests the sun and people give you money for it, there's something about it that I think is friggin' awesome. And so when solar panels are affordable, it does vary depending on the Ontario Hydro contracts. You would have a nice flat roof to bolt a bunch of solar panels onto and increase your income, right? And in theory, like a roof this size, is a pretty big roof, you could probably make a couple $100s per month of extra revenue from putting solar panels on a property like this. And actually, I have a property where they did exactly that. So this property here, not this property here, you can't see it from this picture, but this property here is covered in solar panels. So they put solar panels on the roof of this property. This is 287 Charest Street in Sudbury, and this is a sixplex. Okay, so slightly better location than the Montague property, and obviously 6 units instead of four. So the first thing, of course, is 6 units is that weird place between commercial and residential. There are two lenders, RBC being one of them. I think Desjardins is the other one, but I still don't remember. Are the only lenders who will treat this as a residential property. So you can buy this. You can even use your first time home buyer, whatever. You can do all those sorts of things with this type of property because it is considered a residential, but only if you get your loan from RBC or I believe, again, Desjardins. I might be wrong about the second lender. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's something to keep in mind. It's actually a problem that we're running into now with our sixplex, which is we want to go refinance it, but there's only two banks to take it to for the refinance. So we can either refinance it with the bank who lent to us originally, which is RBC, or we can take it over to, again, I think it's Desjardins. I can't believe I can't remember, but I think it's Desjardins, who's the other lender, right? And that kind of sucks because obviously, usually when you have a property and you do a refinance, you know, there are literally, like, if you go see what these mortgage brokers do, like, there are literally 100 different lenders. Like, there's a lot of lenders that they can reach out to and say, hey, will you give us a mortgage on this property? And unfortunately, like, that's just not the situation with a sixplex. If you're looking to do a refinance, that's it. Okay. Otherwise, they're kind of awesome because, again, they're as close as you can get to a commercial building, but still buy them with residential terms, which can be kind of neat, right? If you've been doing a lot of your own analyses, you will notice, well, if you analyze properties in the 7 units or higher, you will notice that there's kind of this, I guess if I was saying, like, here's a graph, it's kind of a linear graph of like units versus value, right? Obviously, each additional unit increases the value, so the graph is pretty linear. But when you get to 7, there's like a dip in the graph or a plateau in the graph where the slope kind of changes or becomes negative. And the reason for that is because the financing terms change for that sevenplexes are a lot more expensive than sixplexes are, right? So if this, like, let's say $125,000 per unit, right, times 6 is $750,000 property. So to get a sevenplex, you would expect to pay $875,000, right? Another $125,000. And it's true. That might be what you would pay, right? 825. But the catch is that $750,000 by 20% is $150,000 down. But 875, oh shoot, 875 by 25%, right? Because the financing terms change, is $218,000. So we've increased our price by the expected $125,000. And in an ideal world, right, that would be 20% more expensive for the down payment. So our down payment would go up by $25,000, right? But instead, our down payment goes up by $60,000. So it's almost triple the price of going from a 5 to a 6plex, from a 6 to a 7, because the financing terms change. And that's why you will notice as you look around, especially as you start looking at commercial buildings, that you almost never see 7plexes. If you do, they're cobbled together out of the bones of some old hulking house. That's usually how you'll find them. The reason for it is really simple. The financing doesn't really make any sense, right? It is it is much more effective use of your money in almost every situation to buy 2 6plexes than to buy a 7plex, right? Or even just to buy 1 6plex compared to 1 7plex. And so that's tricky. Um, there is probably, I don't know any, but there are probably investors in Southern Ontario who look for 7plexes where the seventh unit is crap, like it's like a little 1 bedroom or it's like a bachelor or something, and who will do renos to bring it down to a 6 so that they can refinance out of the 25 into a 20 down, and then they can sell it, right? Because now a 6plex is marketable to a much broader group of people. Uh, more people feel comfortable qualifying for a residential mortgage than who feel comfortable qualifying for a commercial mortgage, even though it's really pretty much all the same thing. Most people just, there's a few extra steps involved in doing it commercially and everything. So that's another thing to consider, right? When you're looking at any given property deal, right, and you're considering the exit, you have to consider the exit not just from the perspective of, what are people's preferences, right? So going back to the whole minivan thing, not just from that perspective, but also what are people's options, right? This is real estate, which means people are not buying it by themselves. They have partners, they have lenders, they have spouses, they have whatever. So they have people who they need engaged with their plan. And how do you get those people engaged, right? And the hold on, that was weird. And the answer to how you do that, right, is you make sure that the property that you're selling is going to align with their interests, right? So obviously the minivan thing, but also, right, financing. There's a reason why vendor take back loans are a thing, right? And there's a reason why they're much more common with commercial property than with residential property, right? And the reason is really simple, is the options of a residential buyer. There's usually a lot of options, right? All of the banks, assuming they have decent credit, all of the banks, the credit unions, etc., they're willing to lend money on a mortgage to somebody who's looking to buy a house, right? For commercial lending, there are much fewer lenders who are much more stringent about their lending requirements, right? And it is much harder for them when doing their lending. It is much harder for them to justify giving you the money. So you, as a person who wants to now buy commercial, well, you might be more motivated than the residential buyers. You might be more trustworthy than the residential buyers. And of course, you're buying something that is going to produce income. So assuming you do your job well, you will have more ability to pay for the property than a residential buyer. But because you don't have the same financing options, I, as the seller now, might sweeten the deal for you by offering you financing terms, right? Which is what a vendor take back is. Because I say, hey, look, I know this property makes money. So assuming I don't think you're an idiot and I think you can run the property as well as I can, then you're going to make money on it. I just want my money out. So I will help finance so that you can pay me out. Right? That's what's going on there, right? That's the equation, is people are trying to figure out what they need to include to make the deal work for the potential buyer, right? And especially in the case of commercial, a lot of the times what the buyer needs is financing terms, right? Because again, nobody buys real estate by themselves, right? So who their partners are and what their partners are interested in is going to be important to you, right? As both a buyer and as a seller, right? Understanding those things. And then obviously taking advantage yourself, right? Because you can be in a position where you're the person asking for the vendor take back loan, which is one of the things that's really sweet about commercial. There's a lot more of that vendor take back stuff going on in the commercial space. Let's just quickly go through Sherritt Street because I'm running out of time here. Or Sherritt Street, however you pronounce it. So this is a $750,000 sixplex, which is exactly $125,000 per unit. So this property is priced right where you would expect it to be, approximately. Slightly better location than Montague. Yeah, I'll show you. Actually, oh no, I don't have it on the thing. It's okay. Forget it. I'm not going. It's too gonna take too much time. But slightly better location than Montague Street. A little bit further. Let me see if I'm getting my map directions right. It's a little bit further south and a little bit further west than from where Montague is. So for those of you who are familiar with the Sudbury map, you'll know what I mean, because Montague's kind of up there in the, what do they call it there? Is that called the junction? And it's kind of southwest of there, kind of. I guess it's probably actually at where the actual junction happens. But anyways, so a slightly better spot. So $125,000 per unit. There are 6 units. This property, like 399 Montague, they know pictures of the inside. So again, they might be looking for a sucker because depending on how bad the condition of this property is, you know, pardon me, it might not be worth $125,000 per unit, of course, right? And that should be the like, it's at ready to go, ready to rent at $125,000 per unit. Otherwise, you need a bit of a discount. So I couldn't find any pictures, so I don't know. It looks pretty well maintained from the outside, though. It does have solar panels on the roof. Typically, slumlords do not have solar panels on their roof. So chances are it's pretty decently maintained, but I don't know. As I said at the beginning, I'm seeing a lot of these listings that they seem kind of like investor traps for out of town investors. This could absolutely be that, right? You definitely have to dig closer than this analysis. Here we have rental. So because I didn't know what any of the units were, I assumed the worst case. Well, it's not the worst case actually, because they could all be bachelors. But I assumed the second worst case, which is they're all one beds, and I assume they're not particularly high rent one beds either, because you could rent a one bed for like 1,100. I said everything is going for 950. Right. So 950 times 6 is. Oh no, I said they were going for 900 flat. Sorry, 900 flat times 6 is $5,400. So that's my rental. Then parking. This property has additional parking, and there are offices nearby. So I guess they rent some parking spaces. This property also has coin operated laundry. And there are 6 units. So I assume each unit will use about $50 per month in laundry. I don't know if that's high or low, but at about $5 per load, I figure 10 loads per month. That doesn't seem crazy to me for an individual. I don't know. If it's a one bed, that might be a little high. If it's a 2 bed, that might seem more reasonable. I don't know. With laundry, it's kind of all over the place, but it's approximately there. It's approximately there. So in total, about $5,800 a month in income from this property, which is cool. It costs $167,000 down the purchase, right? Because obviously we've got our down payment of $150,000, land transfer tax and everything else is another $17,500. So 167 total to be into this property, right? We have a $2,200 a month mortgage payment, $2,214.94. The taxes, according to the listing, so pro forma could be BS, $3,400. It sounds a little bit low compared to what I've seen, like at Montague, for example, but it doesn't sound like crazy low. So it's hard to say. That could be accurate. Insurance, I've guessed that this is going to have about $3,000 a month in insurance based on the age of the building. The listing said the property is about 100 years old. There's a very good chance that there is either knob and tube or there is cast iron plumbing. There could even be, I mean, there's probably no lead paint at this point because they've probably taken all that out. But there maybe was at one point. Like, it's an old house. There's probably something that the insurance company is going to give you grief over. So I assume the insurance is going to be kind of high. It does not list the utility utilization. So we don't know exactly where it is. I'm going to guess $100 per unit. That is a little bit high. On average, it's like $80 to $90 for a one bed, usage kind of thing. So that might be as low as $500, but we're gonna right again. I like to keep a lot of margin of error, so we'll assume $600. Water, right, is half that, and then gas another $600 a month. Property management is at 8%, and landscaping is about $1,000 a year. You can see there's not a lot of grass, so landscaping really should mostly just consist of snow removal in the winter. You might come in as the new owner of this property and just landscape it so that there is no grass, so you don't have to worry about it in the summertime, or get an estimate for what it's going to cost to trim that back once a month. Either way, it shouldn't be too expensive. Our expenses in gross, 4763. So we've got 58 gross income, 47 gross expenses. You can see things aren't looking too great for cash flow. They won't be as good as Montague was, that's for sure. 2% for vacancy is $108 a month. For this property, I went with 7.5% repairs and maintenance. They did not say that this was like a freshly renovated or whatever. The most recent work they mentioned was done in like 2009, 2011. So I'm guessing it's going to need a little bit of work. Obviously, if things were fresh, you went with 5%, that'd be cheaper. And if you went with 10%, it'd be more expensive. Yeah. Tenant consideration, you could skip that if you wanted to, and water heater rental. There is probably a water heater that is rented. It's not clear from the listing whether or not they own that water tank or not, so I went with they don't. $50. We put that all together. My gross withholdings is $750 per month, $743, which means this property should cash flow about $300 per month. $300 per month is okay. In total, that means our annual gross cash flow is $3,500. $3,500 on $167,000 is an awkward number that I can't do the math on in my head. But if I do it on my calculator, it's like a 2% return. So 2% cash on cash return. That's not terrible because if I factor in my principal recapture, my passive appreciation, which are both around $1,500, that's about $30,000. So $33,000 on 167, is now a pretty good return, right? That's almost 20%. As you see here, my 5-year average is 19%, right? So you're going to find like a property like this would have a strong return on what I like to call the back end, right? On the principal recapture, on the passive appreciation, on the things that don't flow. Right? It has a cash flow, but just not very much. And I think you'll see here the active appreciation says you lost was negative $14,000. That's because I said when I analyzed this property, I said that it is worth. Wait, no, that's not right. Why is that? Yes, that's right. That's right. I said when I analyzed this property that it was worth 700,000, not 750. I think 750 is like, yeah, if it's worth exactly the 125 per unit, then it should be worth 750. But my guess is that some of those units, probably this is like most buildings like this, where like there's like a 2-bed, a 1-bed, a 3-bed, a bachelor, things are kind of crammed together, and not all the units are very equal, and probably it's slightly overpriced. It's really, really hard to say. I'm assuming that it's overpriced based on two things. One, these properties are hodgepodges, and so there's a very good chance you'll have a bachelor in here. And two, these properties, well, they don't have any pictures of the internals. So how do I know that it's in good condition, that I'm not going to have to renovate it, that et cetera, right? Assuming the internals are in good shape and my rental assumptions are correct, then you could buy this property and be happy with it. But my assumptions could be incorrect. The rent could be a bit lower. And I don't know what the interior is like. It could require me to spend quite a bit of money to get inside. So looking at property like this, looking at this kind of analysis, I like these numbers. 20% looks good to me. His house is a bit more expensive than I'd like. Like, I'd prefer not to have to spend $167,000 up front before I've done anything. But I forgive me. I feel like you'd be getting a pretty good deal. So this is the kind of thing where looking at this analysis, assuming you're in the market, you're ready to go do some shopping or whatever. This is the kind of thing where I'd move forward and reach out to the realtor and say, hey, let's get some real numbers here and find out what the realtor knows about this property, the people who owned it, et cetera, because they may have some insight. The very last thing that I did not include in here for whatever reason, I guess I didn't know what to estimate, is it's covered in solar panels. So solar panels, there's income as well. Usually I'd put it under misc income, but I screwed that up somehow. So those solar panels are generating electricity, and usually they'll have a contract to sell that electricity for like 9 cents per kilowatt hour, or 13 or 17. Some contracts were as high as 19 or 20 cents. Though those are the older ones. Just so that we're clear, right? Electricity off peak in Ontario, it's like around 13 and a half cents, depending. It can be even lower, depending like what time of day we're talking about. On peak, it's around 17, 18 cents per hour. Can be a bit higher depending on where you're located, etc., time of use, etc., etc. So basically, if you have a contract that pays around 15 cents or higher, chances are it'll be profitable to operate your solar panels. The newer contracts, like if you put solar panels up today, I believe you're just stuck at market rates, and so you will not get a guaranteed contract. Right, the way these contracts work is like it's like 18 cents no matter what time of day it is. They buy the electricity from you, and that's how it works out to be profitable. Because during the time of day when electricity costs 8 cents and you can sell it for 18, then you are buying your electricity that you're tends to use for 8 cents, and you're selling the electricity you generate for 18. I think that math is easy to understand. So you'd have to find out what kind of a contract they have to see whether those solar panels were worth very much. And you know what? The seller might have said, I'm putting an extra $50,000 on this property because of the solar panels. They aren't worth that much, but let's say they spent $25,000 installing them, kind of a thing. So they're saying, hey, it's worth double because you don't have to install them, which is probably not how the math quite works, but it sounds fair, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And that's something that, like, for me personally, every property I look at, pretty much, I think about solar panels. Um, I still think that solar panels are a technology that are a little bit out into the future. I don't know that there's something that's quite ready for prime time, but I do think there's such an opportunity there, right? You have a roof, it's not doing anything. You put solar panels on it, they'll help to protect the roof, and they produce electricity. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer if that, as long as there's a market for that electricity. As just I mean, it's a tenant that never complains, right? So uh, really, really fantastic opportunity when you have properties that have that capability. Of course, for a property to really be good for solar electricity, it needs a south facing roof that is unshaded. You'd be surprised at how even like one or two trees can really reduce the electrical output of solar panels. So you've got to be, mindful of the requirements of solar installation and setup, and make sure that it is correct, right? If you see somebody who has a house with a north facing roof and they've put solar panels on it and they've just covered it in solar panels that face north, that's cool, and it was probably expensive, but it won't produce very much electricity because they've screwed up the fundamentals, right? So that's something that you keep in mind. But I think in the future, right, especially, you can see the trend. The cars, they're going electric. Pardon me. The cars are going electric, right? All sorts of things. So there's going to be more and more and more electricity as time goes on, and more electrification. And obviously, it doesn't seem like it seems like we're going to need a lot more electricity in the future, and it does not seem like a problem that we're going to solve by building a bunch of like natural gas power plants. People don't like nuclear power plants, even though they're safe and effective. So we're probably not going to build those either. Wind turbines, not only do they kill all the birds and bats in the area, but also they're very, very expensive to maintain, and sometimes they explode in gigantic fireballs. If you've never seen wind turbine failures, you should Google it. That stuff is insane because they go off like fireworks. So while wind turbines will definitely play a role, they have a limited use case because they're expensive to maintain. Like I said, they're dangerous. They kill all the wildlife, which sooner or later animal groups will start to complain about. And also, they are restricted to where you can use them, right? If you have like a valley that doesn't get much wind, I guess valleys get wind, but you know what I mean. If you have a place that's not very windy, it's not very useful to you. Solar panels, as just one more piece of the equation, they can't solve the problem either. But hey, if every house could generate 1 or 2 kilowatt hours of electricity, that would go a long way to reducing how much electricity you need to generate, right? Because yeah, your average house consumes more than 2 kilowatts, whatever, but that's still a lot of demand that's taken off of the grid, right? If every house was able to do that. So as we see um, more and more migration away from fossil fuel economy and away from sort of some of these alternatives to electricity, and we see more greater and more electrification, that's going to put a strain on the electrical grid, which is going to increase the cost of electricity. That's happen. And so you, as a producer whose input is electricity from your solar panels, you're going to see a premium on that electricity. And obviously, the only people who are really going to be in a position to capitalize from those increases is going to be the landlords. So it's something that I keep in mind, just because it's, to steal from Wayne Gretzky, you go to where the puck is going to be, right? You go to where the ball is going to be. The ball is going to be there. Maybe in 5, 10 years. I can't tell you the timeline. It might be longer than that, but that's where the ball is going. So it's just something that I always keep in the back of my mind. And I thought I'd share and I'd mention that. Yeah. So we looked at a couple properties today, and I talked a little bit about some of the thoughts that aren't necessarily related to the analysis, but that are related to the deal, and some of the things that you should think about and really consider when you're thinking about how you're going to exit, why you're entering, who you're marketing to. These are all very important factors for trying to decide what is the highest and best use of your property, what is the best strategy for you to pursue as the landlord to maximize the value of your property, and of course, to make sure that you can exit when the time comes. You can sell the property on to the next person, and hopefully they can do well with it as well, right? Yeah, so I'm going to end here. If you have any questions, obviously now's the time. Feel free. Hopefully, this was both interesting and helpful and useful. Um, I definitely think something that I wish I'd had more of, and I did get a bit of it, and I was certainly very lucky to be able to work with someone who owned properties and be able to talk to them. But I always wish I understood better, kind of what investors were looking at and thinking of what they're seeing when they look at a deal or a property. So I hope I've given you a better idea of some of the things that I see and what are the things that I like to think about. Um, I really can't understate, like, I really get excited about the solar power thing, even though it's only represents maybe a couple $100 of cash flow per month. I just think that it's the future. And I really think, again, if I look at something like this, I guess I got rid of it. But if I'd gone, oh no, here it is. Here's a picture of 399 Montague, right? Like if I look at that nice flat roof and I just imagine it packed full of solar panels, like how much money could you make? I don't know, right? But a couple $100 extra per month, and it all adds up, right? If you buy this property, I think I analyzed it at $15,000 of cash flow or whatever. Let's say I'm wrong. Let's say it's only 10, right? Let's say I'm off by 5 grand, but still, let's say it's 10. Well, now I can cram solar panels on there with $10,000 a year in cash flow. I could pay off those solar panels in like 2 years, but they may add an extra $3,000 to $5,000 to my cash flow. So now I'm paying them off in a year and a half, and then right. So there's some really cool things you can do to me personally with solar panels. And of course, I wouldn't do that. You'd finance solar panels because you finance them for like 1% or whatever. But I'm just saying you could theoretically pay for it cash if you wanted to. In some cases, you could even wrap it up as an improvement in your mortgage. Just negotiate that with the lender when you're buying the property. Um, you could also maybe get away with that, right? Because that is an option as well. Sometimes they'll give you improvements, right? And solar panels definitely count as an improvement. So that's something you can also explore. Okay, thank you for your time. I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday, and I guess I'll see you next week. There he is, Elias. You know, no problem. Every time I do the wrong thing.